Welcome to Syndicated Nightmares, where each week we take a deep dive into an episode of Freddy's Nightmares based on the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. Hosts Dave and Michelle talk about Season 2, Episode 2 of Freddy's Nightmares, titled Heartbreak Hotel, which aired on October 9th, 1989, written by Jonathan Glassner and directed by William Malone. And the summary for this episode is, a tabloid reporter learns that the stories he has been fabricating are coming true when he is sent into the field to write about an Elvis sighting, and an amnesiac whose memory is returning in bits and pieces worries that he may have killed someone.
So we have an interesting little tidbit for this episode.
Oh, about the actress?
Yeah.
Yes.
So the actress who plays Ellen, who's like the editor or the owner of some like knockoff National Enquirer tabloid magazine, is the woman who co-composed and sings the Facts of Life theme song.
Yes. That is like the most amazing credit to have. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that song. I sing it and hum it all the time.
And I liked that on the sitcom it had, because they use different portions of the song, so there's like different lyrics during the opening credits and the end credits.
Yeah.
It's so great.
It is a great song.
So she will always have a special place in TV history.
Oh, heck
for doing
yeah.
That. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a newspaper writer named Roger who is in his office, and I don't know if he's packing things up, but he's in his office, and Ellen comes in to say goodbye to him because he's leaving the Enquirer magazine to go work for the Chicago Tribune because he's tired of writing basically BS articles and he wants to be like a real journalist. So Ellen asks him to stay and write one more story because she's still paying him throughout the entire week, so she feels like she should get one more story out of him. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And she's like, why don't you write about your suicide or something like that? To where he puts himself, the paper shredder thing, like, I don't know what they're called, but like they're those big square things, and it has like the cutter on the side, and so you can cut strips of paper.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, he's like forced to put his head in between the counterpart and the blade, and like is supposed to like decapitate himself like a guillotine. But he wakes up before it happens because, oh, it's a nightmare. Big surprise. There's a nightmare in Freddy's Nightmares.
Although there's a lot to keep track of with his like newspaper job, because the dream opens up with he's leaving to work at the Chicago Tribune. But then when he wakes up from the nightmare, he's not leaving yet. He's just interviewing there, and the interview is next week.
Yes. So that's when when he wakes up, Ellen asks him to go to Springwood on assignment because there has been reports that Elvis is living in a hotel room in Springwood, Ohio, which after everything that happens in Springwood, it's not too far-fetched that Elvis would be living there.
Yeah, that's true. Would be like the least interesting thing to happen to Springwood.
Yeah, that's very true.
With all the Freddy stuff going on.
Yeah. So I wonder if Freddy is an Elvis fan or not. He doesn't really say in this episode. Even though they talk about Elvis, Freddy never says either way.
Yeah. But we learn he is a tabloid fan because it cuts to him like reading the Enquirer and getting all into it.
Oh, yeah. And I wasn't able to read the titles of the story, but from what I could see, they sounded all pretty ridiculous and, just off the wall.
Oh, I wrote in my notes, UFO stole my Buick. That might have been on the wall of the newspaper office. I'm not sure where exactly that headline was.
Yeah, that was on, Roger's wall, but the other tabloids that Freddy was reading, they were all pretty comical like that. So Roger goes to Springwood, and he goes straight to the hotel to find out if Elvis is there or not. I guess the owner of the hotel, and it's not like a Hilton hotel. It's kind of like a bed and breakfast kind of hotel, like that style. If you watched Gilmore Girls, it kind of has the vibe of the hotel that Lorelai works at. I think it's called the Dragon Inn. Kind of has that vibe to it. But anyway.
But it seemed pretty big though. Like the exterior shots, it seemed like a pretty large building.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I would say like it probably had about 30 rooms, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he goes and asks the owner if Elvis is there, and the owner is like...
He's with John Lennon.
Yeah. He just left to go on tour with John Lennon, but he'll be back. And so Roger calls Ellen to basically tell her, like, the story is a bust, and she makes him stay at the hotel just in case Elvis comes back. And as I was watching this, I was like... okay, what kind of cuckoo lady is she if she's like really buying that Elvis is alive? But I had to remember, this is 1989, so the probability of Elvis actually being alive was like something that people believed, you know, because he had only been dead for, 15 years, something like that?
Oh, yeah. I do remember it, yeah. You don't seem to like hear that anymore, but I do remember in the 80s hearing rumors that Elvis was alive.
Yeah. Yeah, in the 80s and 90s it was a big conspiracy, but I think Elvis would have naturally died by now anyway, so it's kind of like died down a bit.
And then I noticed while Ellen is talking to him on the phone, she's like moving things around on a storyboard, and it looked like President George Bush Sr., and a sheep. That was her story, President Bush and a sheep.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Bush was president in 89, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. A lot of times, movies and TV shows won't use the actual president of that time period for whatever reason. So I didn't notice her doing that, but it's kind of cool that they actually used nonfiction people in their fictional world.
Yeah.
So Roger has to stay at the hotel until Elvis comes back, and he orders room service for like enough to feed 5 people, I think. It was a crazy amount of food that he ordered. So much that the room service girl, her name is Mary, played by Tiffany Helm, she comes in and the tray's really heavy, and she's like 9.5 months pregnant. She's like so pregnant. Like about to burst pregnant. And he's like, oh no, I'll take that tray. Like, you're about to give birth any minute. And so she sits down, and what do you know? Her water breaks and she goes into labor.
And then when they're sitting there talking, like after her water is broken, and she asks him to take her to the hospital, and he asks about the father, and she says, you know, he left town when he found out. I don't know what possessed me to get involved with a guy like that. And he's like, oh, possessed. And then he decides he's going to write the story, I gave birth to the devil's baby. Which
I wonder if that's how, like, actual fake tabloid headlines come about. They, like, hear some little whispers in the wind about, you know, oh, I was possessed or whatever. And they're like, oh, I'm just going to run with that.
Are those tabloids still around? Like, I know there's, like, the Inquirer about... where they have the stories about celebrities, but are there still the tabloids that are like, you know, Bat Boy, those types?
Yeah, but they are very few and far between because the internet has kind of taken over all of those conspiracy theories. But I did see one. I think they're mostly at like newspaper stands, or not so much in the grocery store anymore. But yeah, I think it was maybe a year or so ago that I saw one of those. Ah. Yeah, I think it was about about nuclear testing or something like that. It might not have gone as far as Bat Boy. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, maybe nuclear testing will lead to Bat Boy.
So he comes up with the title, I Gave Birth to the Devil's Baby. And as he goes to the hospital with Mary, and he's waiting for the... and he's like actually in the delivery room with her. And it turns out she... is actually delivering Satan's baby, according to the doctors. Like, the baby comes out and it has like horns and a very like alien shaped face, like devil oval triangle kind of face. And, and the doctors are like, what? What's going on?
It reminded me a little of the delivery scene in Nightmare 5 when Alice like relives that.
That's exactly what the baby looked like. It looked like a little baby Freddy coming out. And I thought, oh, what a great way to tie that in. But no. No, they dismissed
the devil's
that.
baby, not Freddy's baby. Yeah.
Which I don't know which would be worse, the devil's baby or Freddy's baby. Because I don't think they would be one in the same. I think they would be two different entities. Right. I don't know. Something to think about.
Well, Maggie was Freddy's baby, and she turned out okay.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Right.
But I think because she was Freddy's baby pre-burning... So,
true. Yeah,
although, like, burning isn't hereditary and, like, scars aren't hereditary, but still. She delivers Satan's baby, but it turns out that it's all a dream, and Roger is just, like, in the waiting room, and he had fallen asleep waiting for this baby to be born, and the doctor comes out and tells him that the baby was a stillborn, but there was still some concerns and abnormalities about the baby. And he's like, she uses some like scientific term to describe what was going on with the baby. And it basically turns out that the doctor's like, well, the baby had horns and looked like the devil. And then, like, walks away.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so he calls Ellen and he's like, we can't use that story. And there was a weird, there's this weird, pause, and he's staring at someone going up the stairs, and I think it was supposed to look like John Lennon.
I didn't catch that at all, but that's funny.
I rewound it, but it looked like John Lennon in, the 50s, the sort of the clean-cut Beatles look, not what he looked like in the 80s when he died.
Okay. Yeah. I think he died in December 1980.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's what they intended, but it seemed like, because I was like, why is he staring at that guy going up the stairs? And so I rewound it a couple times. He tells Ellen he doesn't, he's done, that the devil baby story was a bust, and she's just totally bullshitting, but she's like, oh, a letter came for you from the New York Times, and then she pretends to read it, and it's a rejection letter because he's a terrible writer.
That they rejected him for his poor spelling and punctuation, and it's so funny, though, if you apply to a job, and it's, the late 80s where you don't have email or anything secure like that. But if you apply to a job, a new job, would you really use your current employer as the return address? Do you really want
That's a good point.
mail about a new job coming to your current employer? That'd be like an email that you sent about a new job coming to your boss. And he just walks out and it's like, oh, hey, you didn't get that job you applied for.
It's a good point. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. So she completely made up the letter from the New York Times just to keep him on. And so Roger goes downstairs to the lobby and is looking for a good story. And so he talks to the hotel manager or the hotel owner again for a good story.
Yes, and the hotel owner says there was an unsolved murder last year. And he saw the hotel guy saw the killer run off, but didn't see his face. So Roger decides that the tabloid story he can turn that into is faceless man electrocutes hotel guest. And then Roger has this dream of seeing a guy get electrocuted in the tub by a guy who doesn't have a face. And then Roger wakes up in the tub and he almost gets electrocuted himself.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy is taking a bubble bath or something like that. And he looks up and there's this big dome light above him, and there's a man, and he has a face, we just can't really see it because it's dark and hidden in the shadows. And he's toying with the light, taking the light fixture apart, and he grabs the wires and puts the live wires into the bathtub and electrocutes this guy. And I thought, well, if you're touching the wires, wouldn't you get electrocuted too?
Was he holding the wires when they?
I thought he was.
When they made contact with the water. Oh,
I thought he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then that's when Roger wakes up, and Roger himself is and it's in the bathtub, and he looks up, and the light above him is kind of like wobbling, like it's about to fall on top of him. And I think it actually does, right?
It does. He like jumps out of the tub, and then the wire falls into the tub. And then and then that's when he calls up his editor again, and he's like, everything I write comes true, because the devil baby came true and the electrocution came true.
And she makes some comment about how you better write about becoming a millionaire because you're never working for me again, or something like that. And he's like, you can't fire me. I quit, thinking that she has already hung up. And he calls her like a few names, like dummy head, something like real low key. and how he's like, I'm not going to work for this $10 a week job. And that's when I was like, hold up. I don't care if this is October 8th, 1989. Why are you only making $10 a week?
Right, you're breaking some labor laws there. Yeah. He just really wanted to work with the woman who sang the Facts of Life theme song. So,
well, and I might do it for like $10 a day, just like that one day. I would consider it community service, but $10 a week, I don't know. So he goes back to the lobby, and he sees the hotel manager again, and he like goes to talk to him for another story, possibly. And in the lobby are these two rivalries. The guy who owned the local newspaper and spent like his entire life building it up, and then the business tycoon who came in and like swept it under his feet in the matter of minutes and stole the newspaper company right out from under him. So they kind of have like words in the lobby, and it's very like 1950s gangster feel to it, you know, like mob gangster much. Feel to it.
The newspaper tycoon, you know, comes into the lobby and says he needs a new room, and Roger offers to trade rooms and talks about how he's a reporter. And the guy says, I don't hire slobs.
Yeah, because he's kind of dressed like all disheveled, like.
But it seemed kind of harsh. Like,
yeah, it was a bit harsh. Like, he wasn't that unkempt. He just had like, he had like a blazer and a shirt on underneath it and like khakis. So he wasn't like a homeless person outside, you know, like,
right.
His clothes were nice, but yeah, he was a bit scruffy. So, well, I don't think he ends up giving up his room because the guy doesn't take it from him, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. All right. He's talking to the hotel manager, and the manager's like, oh, by the way, the Chicago Tribune called. They don't want to interview you because they read your stuff. And then your boss called and said you're fired, and she isn't paying for this hotel, so, like, pony up the dough because you're not staying for free. Oh, and the whole time he's like eating these huge jawbreakers.
Yeah, which took me a little while to catch on to, because I kept thinking, like, what is that, like, growth in his cheek?
Yeah.
But and
it would just be on one side, and I thought, like, does he have like a sucker or something? But there was no stick coming out. But yeah, he's just like gnawing on these huge jawbreakers the whole time, and later we find out what it's about, but like it just made no sense.
Yeah, so he decides to use his, I write headlines and they come true power to get revenge on this billionaire. So first he's going to do billionaire takes poison, but then instead, I wrote it out, billionaire leaves newspaper empire to reporter after he takes poison.
So he goes to the business tycoon's room. Hey, man, I'm young and hip. I know what the kids want to read. You should hire me. And this has multi-levels here going on. First of all, this man is not young. Like, he has to at least be in his late 30s. And while that's young-ish, it's not young and hip, and late 30-year-olds don't know what the kids want to read. So,
right.
And he's like, I have so much experience. I've been working in newspaper for 5 years. that isn't a long time.
Yeah. It's not.
Not.
Maybe it was written for like a 25-year-old, this the part.
Maybe, and like the 25-year-old dropped out or something, and they just got this guy. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so he's like, I'm young and hip. I can totally write these stories for you. And the tycoon is like, yeah, I just said no to you because I wanted to see if you had the drive to go for it and if you took no for an answer. And since you stood up to me, I'm gonna hire you. So they have some alcoholic drink to like toast his new job. And they said what was in the drink, but I can't remember all the ingredients. I just remember the main ingredient.
Right. There's like vodka and schnapps and couple other things.
Yeah.
And a little bit of arsenic.
Yeah, because Roger's like, this tastes funny. And the dude is like, oh, well, it has the normal ingredients. And it talks about gin and peach schnapps and everything else that's in it. And he's like, oh, and a little bit of arsenic. And so that's when Roger, like, starts choking on the arsenic because he's going into cardiac arrest.
Oh, as he's dying, the guy says, haha, I'd like to leave you my newspaper empire.
Mm-hmm.
Because, so the headline, again, is billionaire leaves newspaper empire to reporter after he takes poison.
Mm-hmm.
So the twist is that Roger didn't specify the he, and he takes poison.
Yeah.
So it ended up being the reporter.
Yeah, so it's a problem with pronouns and a misplaced modifier. So, grammar will get you every time.
Yep. Which I thought, like, I wasn't expecting that. Like, when he's dying, I, like, look back at my notes and I'm like, oh, yeah.
Uh-huh, yeah.
It was a cool twist.
Yeah, and it was so much like Wishmastered, where you had to, like, how it says, be careful what you wish for, because wording is so important in this kind of stuff. So I think it would be great if this episode was mandatory for high school English curriculum. That they had to watch this episode so they understood the importance of grammar and not having about pronouns and misplaced modifiers and dingling modifiers.
But then they'd be like, but what's President Bush doing with that sheep?
Yeah, that's the only thing they would take from it.
Brings up so many questions.
Yeah. So Roger dies and Ellen goes to Springwood to pick up his property and his body. And they say that, she asked how he died, and the doctor's like, oh, he choked on his jawbreaker. And she kind of believes it, but then she rummages through all his belongings and she listens to the tape recorder where he said his billionaire leaves newspaper empire to reporter after he takes poison. And that's when she's like, oh, Roger, you've always had problems with your pronouns. And so, like, she totally... Well, either she totally knows what really happened, or she, just wanted to stick him with one last insult before the man was buried. I don't know. Yeah,
I guess it could go either way. But I also liked she's standing in the hospital and she sees Elvis being wheeled through.
Yes, yeah.
And she asked the doctor, like, is that Elvis? Is he dead? And the doctor's like, of course, everybody knows that. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was fantastic.
But how long has he been dead for? Because he looked pretty, crisp and clean for being dead for 15 years.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the first half. Now we pick up the second half, and the lead character, I don't think we knew from the first half.
No, it seems like the doctor is in it briefly, but it's more the locations. It's not so much any character from the first half.
Yeah, we open up at the hospital where Roger was, and there's a wife and a daughter, and they are there to pick up the husband that is in the hospital because he got into a car crash and has amnesia now. He doesn't remember anything, just this reoccurring image of crashing and like going down a really windy road, and he just goes off the side and crashes.
Although now that I think about it, I guess we could talk about it at the end, but they don't really explain why he was driving erratically, why he was swerving all over the road.
No, I don't think that they mentioned why at all. That's a good point.
Maybe he was just a bad driver.
Maybe. So Freddy comes on and he starts talking about how you need to cherish your memories because you never know when you're going to need them. And he's kind of poking at this guy who has amnesia now. I think his name is Jerry in this one.
Yes.
Yeah. So Jerry and his wife and teenage daughter are in the hospital room and they're trying to get his memory back. So they're looking through like family photos to like jog his memory. And it turns out, so he's like, well, there's a lot of pictures of me and you, the wife, why isn't there a lot of pictures of me and my daughter? And they, say something like, oh, you two haven't gotten along recently because she's dating and driving and you just don't agree with that.
And also, a little off topic, but the mom's dress that she, wore to find the husband at the hospital, it's just this V cut, but it goes basically all the way down. It's like this black, super low cut dress is what she, wore to the hospital to find her husband.
Yeah, I think she was really trying to jog his memory in a different way with that dress.
Yes. But yeah, the daughter is like weirdly distant, and he sees a picture of the fireplace because the wife is like, you spent a whole day painting that. And that sort of jogs his memory a little bit. He remembers that there was something in front of the fireplace. Yeah,
he has a nightmare that night, and he wonders if his dreams are actual memories, because the doctor earlier said, if you want to try to jog your memory, try dreaming, because sometimes like our subconscious knows more than what we do.
And he sees like bloody gloves and a body and a syringe. I guess that's pretty much it. Just sort of the flashes of those things, but he doesn't really know what they mean.
Yeah. So the wife asks the doctor if it's okay to like bring him home, thinking that if he sees the home decor, that will jog his memory even more. But it turns out they're pretty far from home. They don't say where they live, but I guess it's too far to drive if you have amnesia for whatever reason. So they compromise and they stay at the hotel from earlier in the episode. I think they actually stay in Roger's room because Jerry finds a jawbreaker in the bed, or the wife does, one of the two. They find a jawbreaker in the bed.
Oh, I don't even remember that.
Yeah, it was real quick. Yeah.
Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah. So they're staying at the hotel. Jerry has like visions of being injected by something. It's just this needle that keeps being put into his arm, and he doesn't understand what it means.
And he's trying to have sex with his wife. She's just not into it, and is like, "Oh, you haven't been that passionate," and I don't. Yeah. Her excuses are kind of flimsy, but she
basically
does
like
not want to have sex with him.
Yeah. Basically, he's just been this absentee lover since they got married, and that's that. So she goes and takes a bath and tells him to go to sleep. But instead, he goes to the daughter's room. The daughter's name is Sally. And he's like talking to her and like, hey, like you said that we were on bad terms before the accident, but can we just like forget it? I certainly have, haha, which I thought was kind of funny. And so he's talking about like, let's just let bygones be bygones and start over again. And she's kind of hesitant, but finally agrees, like, okay, I'll let everything go and like we'll start from scratch. So that was kind of nice, a little nice moment between father and daughter.
But she's also like, obviously not in the same way as the wife, but she doesn't want to be touched. She's like physically like wants to sit away from him.
Then Jerry barges in to the bathroom where the wife is taking a bubble bath, and she doesn't really appreciate the invasion of privacy. But he says that he's just looking for his medication and he can't find it. And she's like, oh, I think it's on the nightstand by the bed. So he goes in to look for his pills, but instead starts snooping through her wallet, and he stumbles upon something that it doesn't sit quite right with him.
Yeah, he sees photos, which when I saw those, I was like, oh, I remember photos and wallets.
Yeah. Which I have a question to ask you about that pretty soon, but go ahead.
So yeah, he's looking through the wallet, and he sees pictures of her with a different guy. Mm-hmm. And so he like barges into the bathroom, and he's like, why do you have pictures of yourself with this guy? Or who is this guy? And she says it's Frank, his old business partner, and that's why. It seems weird that she would have his picture in the wallet, but they were really good friends. And so, yeah, she has pictures of business partner Frank because he was a good friend.
But like the pictures, they were really close, like couple close. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
Which that's what I was going to ask you when I was watching this. I was like, oh, I have to ask Dave. If you were going through Nick's wallet and you found a picture of him and his friend in a pose that close, and you asked him about it, and he was like, oh, that's just my coworker. It's cool. Would you just let that go?
I don't know. Because, like, in these days of, like, Facebook and stuff, like, you put your arm around someone when you take a picture with them. So, like...
Yeah, but that was, like...
I definitely have pictures of, me, physically close with someone that I wasn't...
Yeah.
In a relationship with.
But their pose was like they went to Sears for a family portrait session.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I had, a wallet with, space for, it was like 4 pictures to flip through. And I actually put a Freddy picture in there.
That's awesome.
Carried around a Freddy picture in my wallet.
I think I had a picture of Heather Langenkamp in my wallet. When, because when you would buy a purse, it would come with, a little change purse or a little pocketbook inside. And it had a sleeve for, your ID and then, 4 pictures, maybe, something like that. And I would put Heather Langenkamp in there. Well, more...
That's so great.
It was more Marie Lubbock than Heather Langenkamp, but, yeah. Whatever, it's fine.
Having a close pose with someone, I think... It's weirder with the wallet photos than seeing it online, because the wallet photos, you just pick your top photos to put in there.
Yeah, your wallet photos are really private and cherished memories sort of thing. Yeah, it was odd, and he was just strangely okay with it and way too forgiving. I'm not a jealous person, but I would have flipped the F out if I found that. Anyway. So yeah, he's totally cool with Frank and his wife posing at Sears Portrait Studios. Then that night, he dreams of killing Frank in front of the fireplace and injecting him with that same needle that he, keeps seeing over and over again. So he wakes up and he's pretty alarmed by it.
Yeah. Yeah. He wakes up the wife to ask her about it. How did Frank die? And she says he had a heart attack and died in front of the fireplace and fell and hit his head. And apparently Jerry was the person who found him and who told them what happened.
Yeah. And then Jerry's like, no, in my dream, I hit him in the head with a rock from the fireplace, and then I injected air in his veins to make it seem like he had a heart attack. And the wife was like, no, but you told us that he had a heart attack and then hit his head. And Jerry's like, oh, no, that's not what happened at all.
Yes. And I actually Googled, is that, I knew, someone could die from, having air injected into their veins, but I looked up, is heart attack one of the things it could cause? And it is.
Oh, that's neat. The only reason why I know you can die from having air put into your heart is because of that scene in Child's Play.
Does that happen in the first one?
Am I messing up the movies? No, it's in Child's Play. He's hiding in a closet, and the teacher comes, and opens the closet.
Oh, yeah, the second one.
Yeah. Oh, with your Emily Valentine.
Yes.
Yeah. With the basketball pump.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the only reason why I know, like, oh, you probably shouldn't do that to somebody because they'll die. Not that I would ever be like, hey, friend, come here. Let's see what happens.
I remember like learning that in science class and just thinking it was so weird because like it's not intuitive that you would think that injecting air would kill you, but
yeah, apparently it does.
It would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that it would cause more like of a brain aneurysm than a heart attack.
It's so, I mean, there was a list of like, the air bubble can travel to different places and do different things, but heart attack is one of the things that could happen.
So air bubbles are like multi-talented and they,
yes.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah. So then the wife goes into the daughter's room and wakes her up. And so they go back into the bedroom and they confront Frank about like what he just said. Jerry is dreaming about attacking Frank and he keeps saying, sorry, partner. And, turns out that Frank, the business partner, is actually the real husband and father to the wife and Sally. And those two just fooled Jerry into thinking he was their father and husband to get him to admit that he killed Frank, which is a very unnecessary and elaborate plan for whatever reason that they wanted to do this.
And also, like, what a screwed up mother, like, bringing her teenage daughter into this revenge plot.
For real, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. So Jerry's like, well, are you gonna turn me in? And they're like, oh no, we have a better punishment than prison for you. And it turns out that Jerry is tied up and they are going to inject air into his veins.
And I liked that he asked, like, why didn't you just kill me to begin with? And it's just like, because it's not really revenge unless the person knows what they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But did they ever say why he killed Frank? He didn't want to share the money, or was he secretly in love with the wife? Like, what? What's going on? So
we don't know why he killed him or why he was driving all erratically and swerved off the road afterwards.
None whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how it ends. Freddy comes on and says something funny.
He says, memories light the corner of my mind, like the song lyric, and then... he pulls out a piece of his skull, like it's the corner of his mind.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's the episode. How'd you like it?
I actually really liked this one. For a non-Freddy episode, I thought it was really strong and that it was really fun. It had, both stories had interesting twists, and it also, like, both parts had real stories. There were some episodes where it's just sort of nightmare things happening, but there's not much of a story. So that both halves actually had, a story that made sense and was interesting. Yeah. I really liked. What did you think?
I thought kind of the same. Granted, we're only 2 episodes in, but I think these first 2 episodes are a really strong beginning to the second season. That's nice because a lot of season 1, it was torture, getting through it. So, I'm very happy with this series so far. I think only because I know how bad it can be. So this is just a breath of fresh air.
Excellent.
Now is a good time to bring on Tiffany. Hi, Tiffany. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
For sure.
How has your day been?
Good.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of yours from Friday the 13th, and watched a bunch of your other works as well. And so it's great to get to talk with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Good to talk to you.
Do you remember the audition process at all?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I had done. I had booked something else around the same time on a soap opera with that same kind of like just real happy Southern girl, right? And so I locked into that character, and they loved it. So, yeah, that was it.
So I was curious about the Southern thing. That was something you brought to the role?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just seemed appropriate that he's in, some small town somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It obviously he was in a rural area, so it just seemed stereotypical and correct to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So your character's name is Mary, and she gives birth to the devil's baby. With her name being Mary, was that supposed to be any type of play on religion or the whole Virgin Mary that you know of?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I'm sure that's how they wrote it. Yeah, I have no doubt.
And there's this whole like nightmarish delivery room scene. Do you remember what it was like filming that?
Yeah, I do remember. I mean, it's when I was quite a bit younger, so I didn't have any kids at the time, so I wasn't really able to bring forth what going through childbirth was like. But I'd had some other kind of wicked medical issues that caused a lot of pain, and I kind of brought those forward. But they shot it, and there wasn't too much. They edited a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember, I think they needed a off-camera scream for me, and I almost lost a friend in the sound man for doing that.
Oh, for being too loud?
So, yeah, when they're like, we need a really blood-curdling scream. I'm like, all right, here we go. And the sound guy, he was, he didn't appreciate. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's odd having a kid on camera, especially when you haven't done it. But I just kind of called upon what I'd seen in other shows, and I kind of just went with it. It's not that difficult when you have. I mean, it's set up. I mean, I'm on a table, and you got a person who looks like a doctor, and it kind of all you got to do is just be there, right? And and it just kind of writes itself.
So your mother, Brooke Bundy, was in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and 4.
Yep.
So I assume you were familiar with the Nightmare on Elm Street movies before you were on the show?
Yeah.
Were you a fan of them?
Yeah, I was a fan of the show and the films. I mean, it's 3 and 4. I don't even think I stuck around. I usually lose interest in franchises after 1 and 2. That's kind of across the board with all of them. But I was a big fan, and I think there's even a picture, excuse me, there's a picture of me, because I wanted a picture, like, holding the little Freddy baby, and being the proud mama. So there's a Polaroid circulating somewhere on the internet of me holding up the little Freddy baby, because that was baby that was used in one of the films.
Oh, is the same prop from Nightmare 5 was used in Freddy's Nightmares?
Is it Nightmare 5? Okay, well, wherever there was a baby Freddy.
Yes.
That's the baby, yes.
That's so great.
Yeah, that was the baby. So, I mean, I was hoping, Robert Englund would be on set, but he wasn't. I don't know, he would just come in for his voiceovers and stuff in the beginning and the end of the shows. So
you're a fan of the horror genre in general as well?
Yeah, I like horror. I'm more to like psychological horror more than gore horror. I mean, I love like American Horror Story. Well, not all of their seasons, right, but several of their seasons. Again, the more psychological, I really like it. Some character development. I don't like the flashy gore and just like let's figure out new ways of killing people for the sake of it. Right. But I do like horror. Like I loved Quiet Place. I'm not a big fan of jump scares, so it's a very specific horror that I like. But I did, I mean, of course, Nightmare on Elm Street was great, particularly the first one.
Is it weird watching your mom on screen getting attacked by Freddy?
No, and I mean, I grew up in the industry, so it's not really that weird for me. And I've shared this before, where I think, as there's always a time in people's lives where they're not getting along great with their parents, or they just have the rebellious stage. And I adore my mom, and I'm like, she's my best friend now. And for most of my life. But there was a brief time where her head's cut off and she's screaming for her daughter to clean up her room. That I was like, yeah, that's my mom.
Yeah.
It really isn't. My mother was never like that to me. But that's how I was perceiving things at the time. I was like, yeah, for all the world to see, that's how she is.
That's really funny. So was acting something that you chose to pursue, or was it something you more sort of fell into since you were in an acting family?
A little bit of both. I didn't really want to get into acting because it is so seductive. You start booking things, and it's hard to leave it. And it's, you can still be working as an older person, actually, as I am now. And I really didn't want that. I wanted to be kind of forced into doing something differently. So I started like modeling. And I didn't have classic model looks. So my agency started sending me out on commercials, and I started booking. And then my commercial agency started sending me out on theatrical auditions, and I started booking. And so exactly what I thought would happen happened, and I got kind of sucked into it because I booked some just amazing jobs pretty early on in my career. And I'm dabbling in it again. I have a few, and it's all horror. Actually, I worked on 3 films since I've moved to Canada, and they're all horror, strangely enough.
Are they coming out soon?
Yeah, well, they're like festival. Well, one is going to be Netflix. One is In the Tall Grass, and these are small roles because it's it's when they shoot out in the sticks where I'm at, they need to hire actors for the smaller parts. So that's kind of what I'm picking up, and it's just fun. You get to work for a day on a film, and it's great. But yeah, it's so. In the Tall Grass, the Stephen King story, is going to be through Netflix. I just went and saw another film I worked in called Red Letter Day, which is going around festivals and stuff if you catch wind of it. Director Cameron McGowan. Again, I just worked a day on it, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely outstanding script and premise, but it's real kind of tongue-in-cheek horror movie, and Come True, where I get to play like a creepy old lady.
Fun.
I'm not sure when that's coming out. Scott Anthony Burns is the director, and he does a lot of like post-edit stuff, and he likes to really do a lot. So last I heard, it's still being edited. So I don't know when that's going to come out or when that's getting shopped around, where it's getting shopped around. So, yeah, those 3, all horror.
Nice.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So actually, in preparation for talking to you today, I watched some of your earlier work, The Zoo Gang. So there were a lot of, it was a really fun movie. There was a lot of physical comedy and a lot of fight scenes. Was that a challenging movie to film?
Yes, I'm going to say yes, but not for the reasons that you think. It was a very interesting time in my life, and I put on like a ton of weight while I was filming it, and wardrobe was becoming very frustrated with me. And as well, the directors were becoming very frustrated with me. So, and because the film is not shot in sequence, it's very strange. Like, I mean, my weight fluctuates greatly through it. But that was through some personal issues I was having, and it's so for me, that was the challenge in it. It was But I did. If you're asking, if you don't even want that much information, you're just asking about the stunts. I got to do some of my own stunts, and that was fun.
Okay.
Awesome. I did have a stunt girl too, whose name I forget. I feel awful for it not coming to my mind because she was awesome. She's in the credits, and she did a great job. She doubled for me on a lot of stuff.
Because there was a lot of like flipping off things and, jump kicking people.
Yeah. The gymnastics, that was not me. I think I got to jump off of a camper and kick somebody, and that was pretty much my stunt. But yeah, my stunt lady was the one who did like.
And I also watched your episode of 21 Jump Street. I was just curious what it was like working with Johnny Depp and Brad Pitt, who was also in your episode right before they made it big.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was. I had so much fun. It was a great shoot, and the both of them were wonderful. It was actually U2 had just come out with Joshua Tree, and we had this. They gave us travel money, like you had to have a certain amount of money to when you were traveling into Canada. And I misunderstood, and I had no money at the time when I booked this job, and I was like, "Oh, cool, cash!" And I immediately went out and bought records. That was like what you do. And I ended up actually having to borrow some money on the plane from this hippie couple that I ended up friending, and we hung out in Vancouver. But Brad and I, we were both smitten with the new U2 album, and we just talked U2 like 24/7. And then Johnny was great to work with. Just fun. Like, both those guys were just wonderful. We had a really good time, and then that's where I met Cheryl Pollack, who is still like a dear, dear friend of mine. It was just, it was like a dream job. And then being in Vancouver, which is one of my favorite cities, so much that I moved to Alberta.
Nice.
I'm like, I missed it by several thousand kilometers, but that's okay. Yeah, it was a great shoot. I mean, I don't know what else I can say about the director. Great worker.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I had an absolute blast. Johnny's stand-in, Bruce was awesome. Like, it was a great shoot.
Oh, fantastic. Do you have a favorite project that you've worked on?
That was probably it.
That one?
No, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Well, I mean, working with Robert Altman early on in my career, again, like how I said, how acting could be so seductive if you if you actually are fortunate enough to book a job. That really was amazing for me. And that really just sucked me into the whole thing. So,
what was that project with Robert Altman?
That was O.C. and Stiggs.
Oh, okay.
Based on Mad Magazine characters, and I think one of those things, it did well in Europe. It was a very obscure film, but it was really, really fun to work on. And then I'm trying to think what else. I don't know. I cited a couple of negative stories, but all in all, like, it's wonderful to be able to work in film and TV. Like, it's the best job in the world if you can get the work.
Excellent. And I know, like, in addition to myself, a lot of people love you for Friday the 13th, and I know you've done horror conventions. And how does it feel to be remembered for that role all these years later?
It's great. I mean, I was actually the 3 jobs that I've worked in Canada were directly because or indirectly because of Friday the 13th. On Red Letter Day, when I was out there, the director proudly pointed to the button on his collar, and it was Jason. He's like, "Tiffany, check it out." Nice. So there was that, and on Come True, I don't know. I think that Come True, I don't even know if it was because of Friday the 13th, but I did a knock it out of the park audition for the director, so he had to hire me. But then the directors and producers off of In the Tall Grass, they knew the director from Come True, and they also saw that I was, Friday the 13th alumni, and I think that had to do with hiring me as well. So I think of all of the stuff I've worked on, Friday the 13th has been even more lucrative for me in post, right? It's between the horror conventions and just, everything. It's, as I've said before, it's like, be cool to people because you never know what you're going to be remembered for. And that was a good shoot too. There were some wonderful people on that. Just a wonderful cast and crew.
Excellent. And you have some really amazing dance moves in that movie. Like, I rewatched it again, and it's really impressive. Was that choreographed, or was that just you?
Nope, that's me. That was what we were up to the time. In fact, this was, and again, you just never know. On Red Letter Day, because we just went and saw a screening of it at the Calgary Underground Film Festival, and there's a scene where there's a girl who's doing that dance, and I was like, it's not super, super obvious, but it's kind of obvious, and it's my husband and I were both watching it, and we're like, duly noted. And then afterwards, I talked to the producer and the director, and they're like, yeah, they did that as a nod to me.
Aww.
In it.
Oh.
That was really, really cool. I was like, man, that's some nice stuff right there.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's like a little scene, and this woman, she's topless doing it. It's like, whoa. Okay. So, but yeah, that was all my stuff, and I've told the story before that it's that the original scene they said they wouldn't be able to get it past the censors, so it was rewritten, and the dancing, like, I couldn't do just like regular weird white girl dancing, so I tried this other thing that we were doing. That's what I was doing in clubs, and they loved it. I'm like, okay, let's go with that. So there you go.
Well, it works very well.
Thank you.
And now that you're back into acting, is there a dream role that you'd love to play?
I don't know. Just more like I like everything that I've been able to do so far. Like the creepy old lady was really fun. And I can't wait to see what he does with like my eyes and stuff. So I like the creepy old lady. I like the real character stuff, right? I'd love to play a villain. I'd love to play just like some derelict, right? Like just kind of go with it, right? And in the third day, I was this like crazy church lady. So any of the big characters, I'm happy with any of them. But definitely, I like them on the darker side, right? So either a drug addict or a villain or something. I don't know, a witch or just a bum. Just anything of the underbelly characters.
Just one last question. Since you've been involved with both franchises, who do you like better, Freddy or Jason?
I think Freddy is a more interesting character. He definitely, he's got because he's got the sense of humor, right? He's got all the like puns and quips and stuff, where Jason's just kind of a frickin' thug, right? So I'm gonna go with Freddy.
Okay, nice,
awesome. I agree.
I hope that doesn't garner me any hate mail, but it's just more of an interesting character.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again so much for talking with us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. Please join us next week where we talk about episode 3, Welcome to Springwood, in which Freddy teaches us the secret of a successful marriage.